So far today we've looked at tenants, we've looked at EPGs, we've looked at VRFs, and we've looked at the contracts that allow things to communicate on the network. Obviously a network though needs to communicate externally, so we need to have some connectivity to our legacy infrastructure and also to external routed networks that we have that clients or servers will be connecting in from. And external connectivity is really easy, and doing a migration from a legacy infrastructure onto an ACI fabric is very, very simple. So let's have a quick look at this. We'll look at layer 2 and layer 3 connectivity. So what I build is I've got my external router, and my external router is connected to my existing infrastructure. So this is my existing network. And over here, I've got my nice new ACI fabric that I've built and provisioned in my data center. And what I need to do is take a server that lives on my existing network and add additional ports on my ACI fabric. So the first thing to consider is really, how do I do this layer 2 connectivity? And the second thing that I need to consider is, where does my default gateway live? So the layer 2 connectivity is very, very simple. I literally take a connection from my old network to my new network. And if I was to draw, I guess, a traditional topology, I might have my Nexus 7Ks at the top in my old network, and maybe some Nexus 5Ks at the next tier. These would be typically VPC attached in that manner. So I've got my connectivity, I've got my existing infrastructure, ACI infrastructure that I'm just going to do with a couple of spine switches and a couple of leaf switches. And it would look exactly like that. So to do, first of all, my layer 2 connectivity, all I need to do is take a cable, take a virtual port channel, and connect my existing infrastructure into a leaf switch. And on ACI, it will look like this. I will have my tenant, and inside my tenant, I'll have a VRF, I'll have my bridge domain, and I'll have my EPG. And this EPG simply contains the interfaces, so the switches, the interfaces, and the VLAN that goes to my old network. So it's very, very simple to do. I just build this EPG, tell it which interface, and I've got connectivity to my legacy infrastructure. Customers then want to consider, where does the default gateway live? And this is very much a personal, I guess a human way of thinking about things. My personal view is that I would move my default gateway off of my existing infrastructure and onto ACI as the first step. Other customers would say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to move my gateway as the last step. And I've had other customers say, what I want to do is move it when I've moved 50% of my workloads. There's really no right or wrong way of actually doing this migration of the gateway. But if you move the gateway first, you gain all of the benefits, so all of the security benefits of ACI, and you can simply migrate your machines across. But it is a very personal thing. There's definitely no right or wrong way to approach this. So now I've built my connection and I've got my EPG, I've got this connectivity to my legacy network across here where my servers sit. I can simply move the servers across, migrate those across. But there's a missing piece of the puzzle, and that is I need to have a layer 3 connection as well. So I'll take a layer 3 path from my existing network down here. So here's my layer 3 connection. And what that means is that I can now just simply change the routing from the external network. So today a subnet lived via this path into the existing network, and when I enable the gateway on my ACI fabric over here, all that's going to happen is that this network, or the route that's advertised, will be removed from this infrastructure and it'll be presented down this path into the ACI fabric. And to present that layer 3 connectivity, in ACI we have a thing that's known as a layer 3 out. And a layer 3 out is quite simply a routed interface. So I'm going to say maybe it's going to be switch 101 port 1/1. So that's the interface. It's going to contain the IP address for it, and it's going to contain the routing protocol, and it's going to contain a special EPG that tells it which remote subnets can be contacted through that network. So we have an EPG that sits just here. And just the same that we have on, as I've discussed previously with the EPGs and the contracts, to allow the communication, and in this case, to allow it to the external network, I simply need to take my source EPG and connect that to here, and that's it. I've then got connectivity to my external world. So it's very straightforward to build out this type of infrastructure, and the migration is very, very simple for customers. Provide your layer 2 connection from your old network to your new network. Decide, do you want to move the default gateway first, last, halfway during the migration? It's really up to the customer to decide that. Then I need to configure my layer 3 connectivity. So I'm going to have a layer 3 connection from my old network to my new network, or from the external routers. And then I simply remove the subnet from the existing network, enable the gateway on my ACI fabric, and apply a contract that allows me to talk from my EPG to the external world. And that's it. That's how we build up a very simple way of connecting from a layer 2, an existing network, to a layer 3 network. And it's a very, very simple migration to take customers through. So we'll look at this on a slide, and we'll build this up in a much cleaner manner. But before we look at that, we'll just look at contracts in a little bit more detail, because something that customers often say is that they don't know what rules they should have within their contracts. And in this example, I've just said I can talk from EPG inside, if you like, to my external world over here. So how do we actually now narrow this down and say, let's be a bit more secure about the connectivity that we allow on the network? So the first thing to look at is the contract itself. And the contract itself is going to contain a number of ports, so TCP ports, that I'm allowed connectivity on. So it could be, and many customers start this way, is that the rule is an any contract. So I'm going to allow any communication using this contract from group 1 to group 2. That's the connectivity that I'm allowing. It's a default, a permit all rule. On my external EPG, what I'm going to list is the remote subnets that I'm allowed to talk to. So for example, I might be allowed to talk to all remote subnets. Or it might be that I'm allowed to talk to specific remote subnets through this external connection. So we've got multiple layers of security that we can build on the network. The contract itself contains the ports, and as I say, many customers start with any. And when I go to an outside world, I can specify the subnets that I'm going to talk to. So any remote subnet or a specific remote subnet. So it's a very simple way to layer up this connectivity on the network. And what I always find key is that customers don't typically understand the rules that they need between their servers. Maybe they've got a firewall they can actually go and look at, but if they don't understand the rules, they don't understand the ports that need to be open, then I always go with a permit any. Because inside their network today, they clearly decided or felt that an any contract to permit all was sufficiently secure. In that case, why suddenly change things when they go to ACI? Just keep it as a very basic any contract, and you've got the same connectivity as you had previously. And once you understand how these devices, how these servers need to communicate, it might be that you use tetration, for example, to actually discover this application mapping. Once you've discovered that, you might then change this from being an any connection to being maybe web traffic. So I'm going to allow port 80 or port 443. So I can go from being very open to much more secure. But customers don't need to think that they need to jump in at the deep end and understand every application on their network, all the connectivity rules. They can simply start off with a permit any, provide the connectivity, and then go more secure afterwards. So again, a very simple building blocks how we construct the network. So I guess in summary, what we've looked at in this series of videos, we've looked at the physical topology, we've looked at tenants and contracts and EPGs and bridge domains, so all of the building blocks of ACI, and we've looked at external connectivity, both layer 2 and layer 3. And hopefully through this you can see it's very simple to walk a customer through this by taking networking constructs they're used to and happy with today and actually layering those onto ACI and thinking, what does this mean to them? Well, a bridge domain that we've got here, that's just a subnet. That's just a VLAN or a subnet that they're used to today. An EPG is just a list of switches, interfaces and VLANs, so where my servers are attaching on the network, or the virtual switch and the VLAN. The contract is just going to be the connectivity rules. Is this a permit any rule, or have I got some specific ports that I want to allow? And for external connectivity, I can optionally say which subnets am I allowed to talk to, communicate with through this layer 3 external connection. So it's very simple to bring this all together and really walk a customer through it step by step and not confuse them and not have them thinking, oh, I need to know applications and I need to know how all these apps are constructed and communicate with each other. Very much start simple with nice, easy building blocks. Then as they want to go more secure, as they want to go more application aware, then we can deliver that on exactly the same infrastructure. It's not an either or. If they want to name things based on a VLAN ID, they can do that. If they want to name them based on an application ID, they can do that. So I think it's very important that we just step them through in a nice simple way how they can construct this. So hopefully these short videos have been useful for you. In the next series of videos, I'll look a bit more at application profiles, how we can do virtual machine connectivity, and specifically how we can do automation and deliver this in a much more agile way and actually make the internal infrastructure appear as a cloud would to a consumer of the network. Thank you for your time.